Okie doke. So we are going to do a walkthrough of making a Revolve vessel for the Revolve vessel assignment. So I showed, and I changed the appearance on this just so you could see a little bit more easily. So you can see inside this vessel here, there are two profiles. There's the profile that makes up the body. There's the profile that makes up the dish. These are two distinct different components. So let's start up and we will have some examples at the ready. Now, one of the things you want to start getting in the habit of, don't start modeling before you save your project. Go ahead and save. So we'll do example walkthrough, if I could spell. Okay. So once you start actually saving, it will be easier for Fusion to actually autosave. Just like anything else, though, always a good idea. Don't just rely on the autosave. You save also. So don't forget to do that. All right. So I've got the example going. It's in the folder. So first things first, what I want to do is I want to create new components right out of the gate. Now, as I talked about, this project requires at least two separate components. The first project, we didn't mess with any of that. It was just the one component. If you look on your hierarchy tree within Fusion, the component shows at the very tip top, currently one component. A component can include sketches, objects, or bodies, in any manner of other parts, like canvases, as in your background images, construction planes. We're going to get to construction planes later, but a component has all of that together inside of it. So you have your component, then within it is made up of sketches, bodies, and that sort. So to do that, I want to go ahead and create at least my two components right out of the gate. That way, I'm not tripping over myself later to make them. It's not a problem to make them later. There's just some things you have to deal with in making them. So to make a new component, you can either right click on the top part, you'll see new component is your first option, or on your toolbar over assemble, the default first one is new component, or drop down, it's also the first one there. So click new component. Now there's nothing already in here, so it's not going to have a parent body or anything like that. So don't worry about that at the moment. You have a, let's go through the toolbox here. Type, standard, yep, we're staying with standard component. Internal means it is a component that is currently in the design. External, you would be downloading or installing or uploading rather other projects from elsewhere. So right now, just internal. Name, we're going to go with vessel. Now, normally this checkbox here is checked for activate. I want to leave it unchecked, but I'll show you what happens when you do. Click OK. Now you see it created at least one component. Now, at the very top, what was this cube at the top left-hand corner of my example walkthrough title, now it's showing this little stack of cubes. That means there's now something else. There's more than one component within the project. But as far as activation goes, as we talked about a little bit, that you activate different components, much akin to when you lock, hide, or activate different layers on like an imaging program, like an illustrating program or anything. You have different layers, you want to lock those out, whatever. Same here. If you click and activate the very top, which when you mouse over the title here, example walkthrough, click that. Now that little circle with the dot in the middle, it is showing you that you've activated the entire project. So when I go to click a new component, for one, you want to make sure the top full project is active. If you leave the, like it created vessel, and if you left that checkbox checked, it would activate this component, this new one I started. And then if I went to make another new component, I'll just leave it as component 2. It created that component within the vessel component. So it's not outright a problem, but it will cause issues later. It's not something you want to accidentally start doing or forgetting. You can change that later. Yes, it's fine, but much easier. Let me just Control Z that. activate the whole project, new component. This is why I like to leave this unchecked. So we'll just say dish. Okay, so now my vessel component and my dish component, which are both empty at the moment, but they're on the same level. Okay. Start with the vessel. So I'm going to create a component or a new sketch. Whereas the first project we started on the XY plane, which is basically the flat tabletop plane. Now I want to start my sketch up in front of me, which will be the X and Z axis, which goes up and down. So on my selection here, I'm selecting the front plane, and it should automatically snap. But on the top right of my whole screen here, my view cube, go ahead and select the front view. That way it snaps right in front, and I know where I'm working. Now, one of the things I like to do whenever I'm working on projects like this that require like a general size or something, I like to start with one sketch that ends up just being my reference. Now, you don't have to do this. I just like doing this. So I'm going to start with a 2-point rectangle. I can just press R. Now, like I said, to make this profile, you don't need the whole cup. So if I have a cup in front of me, I don't need if I just took a slice right between this, went Mad Hatter style with half a cup, I don't need both sides. I only need one. Doesn't matter which one, making a full circle. So first, we set on the dimensions, rough size. I'll click here and start. Rough size, make it like 100 millimeters by 120, 100, somewhere in there. Doesn't really matter. It's a rough size. So left, we'll make that left, right, or X. I'll make that 50 millimeters because that's half of 100. The other one, it's full height, so I'll make that 120. Okay. Now I'm going to double click this and press X, or on my sketch palette, on my toolbox, select construction line. That just turns those into those dotted construction lines. Now I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to rename this sketch. Again, I'm just doing this for me, just like size template, just so I know what I'm working with. All right, so the blue line going up and down, that's my Z-axis. The red line going left and right, that's my X-axis. All right, now I'm going to start another sketch, like in the same spot. It's just that I like to keep my reference sketches separate from my actual sketches, just so I can isolate them if I need to or anything like that. Again, it's just about being able to work with different layers and hiding things. I like to work that way. You do not have to. It just helps me keep things a little bit more straight. All right, now draw half of a cup. So you can do it with straight lines. You can do it with fit point splines. I'm going to start with that. Now, I'm going to start right at the origin point. And remember, your first line in your fit point spline goes straight. And it's not until you start making another point that it starts curving for you. Now, however you want to make, and you can make this larger. I'm just saying that's the 120 by 100 is a rough size. Now, I started my example. I kind of made it like this, kind of like a something more like a pot or pitcher. There we go. All right, so I'll hit enter when I get to a point that I like. I don't want any more lines on here. Thank you very much. Now I can play around with my handlebars. So if I wanted to adjust my lines here, I can change where the points are, click and drag, and then the handlebars come up. I can really mess with that line. I can twist these around if I wanted to adjust them, whatever. It's up to you. Play around with them. Now, what I do want to do is adjust this. But what I mean by that is I'll add to it, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm not finishing the sketch. I'm not done yet, because right now I just have a line, and I want to add thickness to that. So I'm going to use the offset tool to create a duplicate of that line. And as I said in the instructions, your wall should be like 3 to 5 millimeters long, thick. Anything thicker than that is way overkill. Thinner than that, you might be okay, but I wouldn't go much thinner than like 3. That should be good. So I'll use 3 millimeters thick. So I zoom in. That shows that I have now offset that first line over there. Click OK. That will be the basis for the thickness of my vessel. So just if you ever done like ceramics, or again, if you're holding a cup, you can see how thick the wall is. That's what I've just created. Now, right now, it's just 2 lines. It's not a closed profile yet. To finish this, what I need to do is actually enclose this. So right now, I can use a straight line and draw between. Now, this is going to create a problem right here. Let me hit escape just to get out of that tool, because right now, this line here should be straight up and down. Now, I can try to use my constraint tool, but that's going to cause problems also because this second line is offset. But we'll try it. Cool. It actually did adjust. So I used the constraint. Problem is that really messed up this line, because what it did is it took my whole profile and rotated it until that line was vertical. So I'm going to undo that. There we are. So what I can do to change that is I will delete this line here. And I can't just drag that point over because, unfortunately, again, using the offset tool locks these 2 lines together. So what I can do is I can just continue this line over. Oops, let me hit that. So to extend that, I can just like make another fit point spline and just draw that over to the center line, and that would be plenty, really. We're good. I can play around with this. I can adjust this handlebar to try to smooth that line out. It's going to be a problem, but that's just one of the things you might have to deal with. But for now, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to make adjustments in a bit. Otherwise, I want to just enclose this side here. I just drew a line straight up and down. That closed it. Hit escape. So I'm finishing that tool. Now, oops, let me go back out. And remember, you can hit F6 to resize to your whole project. So I'm going to zoom in here. Now, I don't want to draw a line straight across. That will make just for a boring edge, and it looks kind of grody, which is totally the technical term. What I want to use is I'm going to use a circle, but it's hard to draw a circle between there, which is why there's other tools. So I use the create dropdown, go to circle, but instead of the default center diameter circle where you start right at the center and go outward, I'm going to create a 2-point circle. I can start with 1 point there, and as I drag my mouse out, just use the other point for the other side of the circle. Now I hit escape to get out of the tool. Now that has created a full circle, but I do have these separate things I could accidentally grab. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to use the trim tool and just chop that side of the circle out. Okay. So let me hit F6. It goes outward. All right. So now that the inside of that profile, I mouse over and it goes gray, or I get away from it and it has that light blue hue. That shows me it is in fact an enclosed circle. Or sorry, profile. You hit OK. And I'm just going to orbit around a little bit to like a 3/4 view. Or again, you go to your view cube and just hit the home button, and it gives you a 3/4 profile. So now I'm going to use the Revolve tool. So up on your main toolbar, Revolve should be right next to Extrude. If it's not, you don't have to put it there. But remember, go to drop downs and you can add and subtract things from your toolbar by mousing over the tool. The 3 ellipses come out, the 3 dots. Click that, and you can add or subtract things to your toolbar or your shortcut bar. I have it added to mine. Select Revolve. Now I select the profile I want, which is the profile I just created. Now I select the axis. Now, if you drew directly on or use these direct Z axis as part of your drawing, you can use that. But I also have this construction line box that I made. So it's the same thing. It shares the same line. So if I select that, angle, I want full angle. Why is it not selecting? What happened here? Ah, there we go. And it just, boom, makes it part of it. Neato. I just made a cup that will definitely tip over. So those are going to be some of the details you want to mess with. Now, I said that you could actually not create a full type. So when I go to type, I'm going to click angle. Now you could do this numerically, or I could do with the slider, which is in here. It's the circle that's, you can't really see very well because it's technically inside, but if I click and drag this, I could actually make part of a Revolve vessel. Why you do this, I don't know, but I have actually used this to make like hanging planters for like orchids and such like that, because I only wanted like half of a basket and made it that way, and then just created a backside to it. So you could do that, something like that if you wanted. But this is just how you could create an incomplete thing. So if you just wanted a profile that made up partially, there you go. But we're making a vessel, so just go to full. Operation, new body, okie doke. Now, currently, I still have the default appearance on. So just to make it easier to make the distinction between what I'm working on, I'm going to press and hold Shift and press in. That switches to the auto assign colors. That's how the basics on creating this. Now, to make the other part, the dish, right now I have the vessel active. I want to make sure to now go over to the dish component that I created and activate that one. Now you see the vessel has ghosted out, and I can still see it. I can still interact with it. I can still select things, but it can serve as a reference. So I'm going to go back to my front view. Now, obviously, like I said, this will totally tip over. Not a good design. I'm going to go back and adjust that in a moment, but I just want to show you the difference in creating different components. All right. So I'm going to create the dish now. So I'm going to start another sketch. I'm on the XZ axis. Cool. Now this one, I am going to start with a straight line because I do actually want this to be flat. So I'm just going to go straight out. Sure, 40 seems reasonable. Or I could just type in 40, as that would help. There we go. Now I don't want to create another line just yet, so I'm going to press escape. Stop that, and I want to make the rest of it out of a fit point spline. So I'm going to start this, just snaps right to the end of the line that I just finished. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and pan over so I can see what I'm doing. Remember, the first line goes straight, and then the next one, I can start to curve up. If I want to make this like a really deep dish, cool, there we go. I just wanted to add a little bit of a curve to it. So press enter to finish. If you want, you can adjust the handlebars, adjust that curve a little bit if you like. That's fine. Super good. Okay. Now I want to offset that line again. So I'm going to select the offset tool. I'm going to select that whole line. I want this to go the other way. So I'm going to use the drag slider, go downward. We'll go 3. So this time it's -3. Okay. Hit OK. Now I want you to note something. Because, or rather, the first line, when we created for the vessel, it offset, and let me zoom it way in here. You can see inside of it, it made this wonky line here. That's because the first part was not flat. I was trying to just make up the difference on a line. Whereas this one, this first line was in fact flat, or rather horizontal. So when I offset it, the next line was directly horizontal. Now at the top here, it used that as an offset. So this is still offset at that diagonal. The offset tool doesn't go directly in either direction. It goes in more of a uniform, but following direction for whatever angle the line you're duplicating is. So it gets weird trying to predict what is going to happen with an offset. So the best thing is, yeah, try it out and see what happens. All right, but I am going to do basically the same thing to create the edge for this. I'm going to use a line tool. I'm going to enclose these two. So just connect the dots there. Hit escape to finish that tool out. For the top here, I can play around a bit more. For this one, I don't know. Let's make a little bit of a lip. So, oops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do the same to create a 2-point circle, but what I'm going to use that for is a reference. 2-point circle. There we go. What I want is that center point. I could have done this with a straight line also. So if I had just drawn a line across, same deal. I wouldn't have had that point, but when I moused over the center, it would give me the midpoint constraint line. So either way, it doesn't matter. All I wanted to do is use that center point to create a larger circle because reasons. It's totally designed feature just to have this little bit of a lip there. That is all. It's not really overly functional. Now, we talked before, I use the trim tool. You don't technically have to use the trim tool to get rid of these excess parts. It does help clean up your drawing, but you don't have to get rid of them. So I'll show you what happens when I don't. Hit escape. I now have all of this is now highlighted in blue. So this is all enclosed. I finished sketch. Now it's gone back. My toolbar has gone back to the general create. Use revolve. Now, instead of going through and selecting 1, 2, 3, and more, what I'll do is I will select from the right. So remember, if you select from the left and go from the select from the left and go right, it will only select what is entirely inside of your selection box. If you select from the right and go left, it's a different toolbox. It's yellow with a dotted line. It will select everything that box touches. So I was able to select all the little bits in there. So now when I use the Revolve tool, it's going to use all of that. What is my axis? The same, the Z-axis. Now, what it is showing me is this is what can happen. It will create these errors because it's technically actually making all of those profiles within that edge. So really, it is best. You don't have to, but as we get more complex with our designs, it is definitely best to simplify your drawing. So let me cancel this, and I'm going to go back inside this drawing, edit sketch in the history bar, and I'm just going to trim out these little extra bits. Don't want that one, 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 and don't want that one. Okay. So now, when I go to use the Revolve tool, I can just select that whole profile with one click because it selects the whole thing. Boop. I select my axis, the Z-axis. Same thing, it just doesn't give me the errors anymore. So let me orbit up. And the reason I wanted to make that is I just wanted that little lip on the edge. That's all. Hit OK. All right. I go back and reactivate the whole project. Now I have a really teetery vessel, but a halfway decent plate. All right, those are the basics. Let's get to the other parts. So first things first, as I said, my vessel is a really bad design. So first I want to go back and edit that. So let me reactivate this vessel part. Go to the front, and I want to go to the sketch and just edit this out. Okay, a few things. First of all, I'm going to actually move the whole thing up a bit to give myself a little more room. So I'm going to select the whole profile. You can select the edge and double click the line, or you can select inside the profile to select the whole thing. Same diff. I'm going to use the move tool. It's not up here by default. It's under modify, or you can just press M. There we go. So right now it's got the whole thing selected. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Won't let me. All right. This happens sometimes when you have created what's called a coincident, because this line, this starting point, is where everything is locked to, especially because it shares the origin point, the very center of your drawing of your project. So I'm going to right click this, see if it'll let me with that. Now I got to get out of the move thing. And there we are. All right. So I right clicked on that vertex right there. I want to select delete coincident. That should let me move the whole thing now. So I select everything, press move. Poop, it did not. I don't want just the point. Why are you doing this to me? Okay. Strange. I don't understand why it's not letting me. It might have some other coincidences. All right, fine, you jerk. I'll just move it around by myself. Okay, so I'm just going to select the line. That's only going to select by point. Now you're just being a jerk about it. Weird. It's not letting me do it at all. All right, fine. I'll just edit the line. Do your own thing then. Okay. So what I want to do, I don't know. I don't understand why it's not letting me. It's probably got some other locked coincidences for some reason. We'll play with it later. So what I wanted to do first, I want this bottom to be more flat. So I'm going to come in here and adjust first the handlebars. So I'm going to select the points themselves. Select once, it brings up the tool handlebars. Now I can play with tweaking these. Realistically, I should use the starting point first. So I'm going to click the handlebar and just move that so that the handlebar itself is flat. Now I can select this other one and I'm going to move this down a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is just keep this line, my actual drawing line, down a little bit. I shouldn't move that one. I don't really want to move that around. I just want to play with the handlebars a bit. Maybe I'll move this out a little bit just to make this a touch wider. That seems reasonable. All right. Now the problem is I have altered my drawing here. Now I could go back and because I deleted that coincident, the other aspect or the other result of that is these lines are no longer linked. Not necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily a good thing. I kind of want those to be linked. So I'm going to delete this line. If it'll let me do that too. All right. And I'll mess with that in a bit. So I'm just going to readjust my profile here. Yes, this will cause errors later on, but I'll readjust those too. That way you see what happens. All right. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to add a foot to this. Because right now, yeah, this vessel comes to a center point, which can be good for drainage, but it will just fall over if I set it on anything. So I'm going to make a little extra feature. So I'm going to start. I selected fit point spline, and I'm just going to select somewhere. When I mouse over anywhere else, I've got my crosshairs. But when I mouse over the line, that crosshair plus switches to an X. Now any line I start will intersect with the profile here. And I'm just going to draw down somewhere and make a little bit of a kind of goobery little foot. Or adorable, depends on how you think of it. Okay. Press enter. That's finished. Now, I could delete and trim out this internal section, or I could go ahead and just offset the main line here. I'm going to do just that. I'm going to offset just this line. So I select the main line, the main profile line that I had before. Select the offset tool, and I'm going to go to 3 again. That'll offset just the same. However, I want to show you what happens if I do trim that out. Yes, constraints removed. Don't worry about it. Now I'm going to use the offset tool on this profile. You see how now the offset has followed the little foot there. Not necessarily a problem, but in design-wise, that would be terrible for drainage. However, look what happens when I switch out to the 3 millimeters. Well, it looks like I've also encountered an error. But because it's so much further over, that offset is having trouble calculating. So think about that. Just something to think about. You can always back up. So I don't like that at all. Control Z until that line is back. All right. Select there, offset again, go back to 3. Now no longer a problem. Okay. But because I had flattened this line here, the first vertex, now when I offset that, I no longer need to connect this other line. I can delete that little chunk there. So I just select and deleted because that offset from a vertical point. All right, let's go check our other end. Do I have to fix that now? Yes, that now overlapped and did some weird things. So I'm going to delete the half circle that I'd made before. And now I'll just recreate it, doing the same. Circle, 2-point circle, select both of those. Excuse me. Pardon me. Throat got really dry there for a moment. All right. Hit escape to finish that tool. Now I do want to trim this out. Select trim. Yes, constraints are altered. That's okay. Hit escape to finish the tool. F6 to zoom back out. Okay. Now proceed with the errors. All right. So this definitely did some stuff that I didn't really want it to. Or rather, what it did is it only selected the original profile because that was all I had selected before. So I'll go back, edit feature, and I just need to add that. So profile, I just need to also select that little wing nub there. Okay. Now it has that little foot down there. Yay. Okay, so I've now made my vessel somewhat stable where it won't immediately teeter-totter and fall down, unlike the popular toy. I probably will need to adjust my dish now, but for the time being, we're going to leave it there. So go back, activate the vessel. And what I'm going to do now because I don't want to interfere, I don't want that dish design to interfere with what I'm doing next. I'm going to hide the dish because next I need to make drain holes. And this is where we're going to use the circled pattern. So to start that, just like when we were extruding and cutting and such like that with your badges, I need to start with a sketch, of course. So start a new sketch. But I'm going to start it from the bottom. So I'm going to tumble down or just select the bottom label on the view cube, snaps to the bottom. Start a new sketch. Now I'm selecting the XY plane, the standard flat tabletop plane here. And I'm just going to make just a circle. Just need to drill a hole. You can draw a doodle or something if you want, but just for example, I'm going to draw this. I'm going to select a circle. Now, I highly recommend if you are going to make a pattern around a circle, doesn't matter what the pattern design is, but if you are going to make a pattern in a circle, I highly recommend you create your circle on one of the major axes. It just helps simplify things. You won't definitely run into problems if you don't, but I've run into problems a lot, so it's a good idea. So I'm just going to draw a circle. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to draw it on my x-axis here. So when I mouse over the x-axis, it snaps to it. And just somewhere, if you want to use tell you what, I'll do this. If you want to actually have a defined distance away, I'm going to create a circle, center point circle, and we'll say, all right, I want it to be them to be 40 millimeters out. Okay. Hit escape. And I'm going to transfer that circle to a construction line. Now that no longer will interact with anything. So now I can use my other circle, circle and circle, and just where that intersects, there we go. And I don't know, good drain hole that's not enormous. 10 millimeters, that seems reasonable. Okay. Now, your first thought might be, well, okay, now I make a pattern of circles and I extrude all of those circles. Well, in this instance, yes, that works. However, you can also run into problems with this. Now, this is something you're going to have to start considering. You may be doing the exact same function, but different times will require a different order of operations. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Right now, I could create a pattern of circles, and I'll do that. So I have added my circle pattern tool to my toolbar, but right now I'm still in the sketch toolbar. Going to go to create, go down, circle pattern. I can select this pattern, which my pattern is just a circle right now. And just like the Revolve tool, now I need a center point, not axis, but center point, because you could create this wherever you please. But right now, I'm just going to create around the origin, and it automatically creates 3 because I have a quantity of 3, and the spacing is full. I could do this on an angle. I selected angular spacing, and you could make this asymmetrical if you want. I can add several, not 41. Oh my God. 4. You can drag this along. You can also deselect the checkboxes, and that will omit parts out of the pattern. Just different options. For what we're doing, we're just playing around. If you were like making gears or specialty parts, yeah, that comes in pretty handy. But I'm just going to do a full set of pattern. I want all of them, and because reasons, I like odd numbers, so we'll do 5. Okay. I can finish this sketch. Now I'm going to select, or I'm going to extrude all of these. So I have 5 of them selected, and I'm just going to extrude these up through the body. It automatically goes to cut operation. We're good. Hit OK. Now I could also go in and create, if I want fillets on each of these, I can select each line back and forth. I want the inside and outside. But you can actually, if you're filleting the whole thing or both sides, let me cancel the ones. You can actually select the face of that cylinder that it makes, and that'll select both of them. Easier to do that way. But the whole problem here is I'm having to go back and do each and every one. It's not a big deal. There's only 5, but it can be a pain. How big do I want this to be? We'll do like 0.5. That ought to be good. Yeah. Just taking the corners off the edges. Okay. Now, that worked. However, what I could have done is only created one of these and then duplicated all of those features. So when you're making parts like this, it can be very difficult to figure out which set of operations works. And the best way I can tell you, especially with doing features like this, is this next part. Because right now I've got drain holes on the bottom. Great. Let me unhide the dish and activate the whole thing. And you'll see the problem. I've got drain holes. Now water would just get stuck inside underneath my pot. I've got holes. They go down, but they wouldn't drain outward. So what I want to do is actually create little arches on the sides here. So again, go back, reactivate vessel, hide the dish. So to create that arch, I'll just go to the front. Okay, I'm going to start a new sketch. Well, I want to create something that's on all the sides. This worked fine when I was creating something that was looking up underneath, and it was all just on the bottom of it. Well, now I want to create something that's going to go on like the sides of the vessel. but I could only work in one of the three planes, either flat XY, in front of me ZX, or to the side ZY. I can't make these wrap around thing. Now I say that there is a new tool, Emboss. I haven't gotten a chance to explore it much. It is an option. We'll play with it later. But this is the workaround for this. So I'm going to go to the front. I'm going to create a sketch on that front. I'm just going to make like a semicircle. So I'm just going to use the origin point. And let's see, how big is this? It's not showing me. Why isn't it showing me? There we are. Come on. We'll do 15 just to keep it differenty. Okay. 15. And just finish sketch. Well, now, let's see if that's going to cause a lot of problems. That's going to cause real big problems. All right. Well, I'll deal with that in a minute. Tell you what, let me go back and make that sketch a lot smaller. So we'll just make that like 3. Come on. I'm bogging down here. Okay. It's little now. So now I'm going to use that and extrude. See, this is the problem. I can't extrude all of these in multiple directions. I can only extrude in one direction. So I'm going to bring this forward. Now it's going to cut. Problem is now this is a problem of my design, because it's also going to cut into the very bottom of my vessel, but not entirely. Not the biggest deal, but there we are. So now you can see I've made this little notch in the bottom. Okay. It's cut, but it also cut that. We're not going to worry about that right now. That I could always fix by raising the bottom of this my actual profile up a little bit. And say I want to put a fillet on that. Okay, I want to put a fillet on that little curvy saddle looking thing. 0.5, that seems about good. Hit OK. Well, see, this is the problem here. What I was talking about before. It makes it really difficult. Let me just go to the bottom. It makes it difficult to create that in multiple angles. So it's a lot easier to create the entire finished feature and then duplicate the finished feature, rather than duplicating multiple sketches and performing all the operations each and every time. So now I'm no longer in the sketch tool set, but I still have pattern, circular pattern here. So now I'm going to select those faces. I have selection type faces. Now I can select my axis, Z axis. And now it's going to create multiples of that completed set of features. Click OK. Now I did not select my where I chopped this all up. That was whoopsie daisy on my part. I'll have to change my profile a little bit. But now I have these little features in multiple spots. So I'm going to go activate the whole project, unhide the dish, and now when I pan upward, they're very small, but now it has these little pathways for water to escape from underneath the dish. So it's just a little simple feature, but those are 2 different ways of achieving the same goal. One, the first one, to create the holes. And not the big, well, now I have like a clock face thing going. But this first one, I extruded all of the holes, or first I made one sketch, made the circle pattern of all the circle, or to make all 5 circles, extruded all of those, and then made the individual fillets. Or what I could have done was just made one sketch or the circle, extruded the one, made the fillets on the one, and then made a circle pattern of the completed features all the way around, like I did for the rim here, for the edge. So neither one is correct or wrong in this case, but one making all the features and duplicating those does help streamline the process. And if this were a more complex set of features, it would help so you don't have to go through and redo each and every one each and every time. Can also just help with, especially if you have a computer that's not as powerful, or if you're obviously running Zoom or something at the same time, it just cuts down on the things it has to keep recalculating. It just jumps to the final calculation. So that's what we're dealing with. Hit F6, unhide, home button. And as a final feature, as I said, you do not have to do this, but I'm going to press Shift in, go back to normal. It's going to take it back to the normal appearances. I can now press A and bring up the appearance toolbox. And if I want, I can play with just throwing appearances down. So, yeah, sure, what the heck. Stone, granite. Ooh, blue pearl. That sounds impressive. And renders really poorly. Fine, we'll just go with like, again, renders poorly. That's okay. And then plastic, sure, we'll go with a plastic bottom. I don't know. I'm just grabbing stuff. Just make this as gaudy as possible. Now you can actually play with the bitmaps of these. I'm not going to go over that tonight. We're already doing a whole bunch of other stuff, but you can actually alter the appearances by just adjusting the features of those. But we'll play with that stuff later. So that's pretty much what you're going to do. And just so you know, the reason the appearances don't come through as completely clear as they do here, because we are in the design toolbar, or we are in the design entire interface. It was asked when we first started, what the other options here. I click on design, go to render. This is where you would then be able to render a fully realized image of those textures and all that. But that's just for yourself. If you want to play with that, not really important for what we're doing. We're just staying pretty much in the design phase here. And if that gets a little bit too intense for you, go back to just standard shapes. So that's what we're working with. The assignment is on Blackboard. As I said, it is quote unquote due next class. We're going to review them just like we did this first project and troubleshoot anything and go and then move along from there. But this project is very much basing off of what we already did, just approaching it from a different way. So that's the assignment. Please do let me know if you have questions, and we will finish the recording there. So thank you very much.